You know, making music, you're pulling things from the air. You know, you could sit down one day, you'll just be messing about and make the song that like people know you for, you know?
Hi, welcome to the Remotely Creative Podcast. I'm your host, Scotty Carlson. Today we are joined by music producer, mountain biker, skier, IT specialist, Oliver Michael. I've collaborated with Oliver on a number of projects, and he has always crushed it. Oliver has transitioned out of scoring films to purely creating his own music, and it still ends up in films. Maybe even one of yours. So you're Oliver Michael.
Check.
Sometimes goes Oliver Brayshaw.
Yep.
But
that's right.
When it comes to art, it's Oliver Michael.
Yep.
Grew up in South Africa.
Yep.
Spent some time in London.
Close enough. So Leeds, which is about 3 hours north of London.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you move from there to Vancouver?
Yeah, so we moved. So I lived until I was 21 in South Africa, about 8 years in Leeds in the UK, Leeds over to Vancouver.
And then Vancouver to Rossland?
Vancouver to Rossland. Yeah.
So that's a lot of big places.
Yeah.
Funneled down to a very small place.
Right.
And was that by design, or was that just like life kind of happened and you moved and you ended up here?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the long story and the short, and I think I'll go for the shorter one. I think a lot of the moves that I made were just based on a need in my life at the time, or a lack of something in my life at the time. So in England, it was, you know, I found the weather really hard. I found the people really hard, to be honest. And just wanted, and I was also really into outdoors. So Vancouver was a great place. And yeah, then Vancouver, we had kids and we were priced out. So, but also still was really into the outdoors. So Rossland was a great place for that. Cheaper houses, good place to raise your kids, and yeah, mountain biking, skiing, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Makes sense for sure.
Yeah.
And you are a music producer, composer. Well, how would you describe that side of who you are?
Yeah, so my history, I started out playing piano. I actually played, so my parents, they ran a school back in South Africa, and I actually played with, so it was a multiracial school, which was weird in South Africa. They didn't do that at the time. But yeah, so I was actually ended up being the only white guy playing with all these black guys in South Africa, and you know, they're really good at music, so they taught me a lot, and I learned a lot just in terms of piano as well as rhythm, drums, everything like that, which I think was a great basis for just musicality in general. And then it was actually you know, just out of, because I do IT, which is great, you know, it's provided a lot for, you know, I enjoy large parts of computers, IT, which is also a part of what I do, but I needed a creative outlet, which is kind of what led me more into production, which has been maybe a 10-year journey in terms of just refining that part. So in there is creativity for sure, you know, just composition, as well as, yeah, just like the practicality of production skills and that kind of stuff I've definitely gained over the last maybe 10 years.
Right. And was the school that your parents ran, was it like a public, like a general school, or like a music school?
No, it was just a school. It was a private school, but yeah, it was just a school.
Right. Cool. And were your parents musical? Were they into music?
My dad played guitar. Yeah. I wouldn't say super musical. They set me off on the I think what happens to a lot of people, you know, you start piano trying to read music, and that sucked. And I actually remember like the last day that I was done with my last lesson of that like reading music thing. I remember just like riding my BMX like shooting over jumps and just being like, this is the best day ever. But then they got me a different teacher who was more into play-by-ear composition, which is certainly like more my style.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like music's one of those things that, like, there's houses where people grow up where there's just music all the time.
Right.
Maybe it's a friend of yours where you go and there's just like always music on, and there's just something like cool and fun, and their parents might be musical or play music, and those kids grow up typically to have some kind of extra, superpower.
That's the house I live in right now.
Nice, yeah. Which is wicked, and right now our house is full of like 12-year-old boy banger beats.
Rap.
Lots of rap right now, which is sweet. And my wife is like into it, so she supports it. But
yeah,
that's sweet. So did you do any training outside of that, like music school production at all?
No. So one thing that I figured out about myself maybe a little later in life is I definitely learned by doing, which at some point in my life was a bad thing. If you're at school, right, and you got to read the book and then write the test, it's a terrible thing. But I've always loved, being able to actually explore something and learn whilst you're, that's how I learn. So that's definitely been how I've explored and learned music. I didn't start off with, a $10,000 budget and I bought all the stuff. I started off with nothing and I just slowly moved it forward, a tiny bit at a time whilst learning the whole time.
Nice. That's sweet. Yeah. I think that I think you nailed it. Just that learning by doing is so huge. And I think like I'm working on a project right now that I'm completely out of my depth. It's kind of adjacent to what I do, but a whole other world.
Right.
And I'm at the point now where I realize the naive optimism of just not knowing what I was getting into has kind of got me this far. Because if I knew how much work or the intricacies, I would have been like, oh, not now. But it's so much more fun, I feel like, and if you're a curious person, just to kind of keep peeling, and then years go past and all of a sudden your knowledge is expanded.
Right.
That's a super cool way to learn. And I feel like now there's so much available to kind of
absolutely
get that help.
Great time.
It is. It's rad for that.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to music production, you've kind of explored not only lots of different genres, but lots of different mediums, from working in film and television scoring, and you've done your own, and you still do your own production and produce music songs that you distribute, and then kind of a mix of all of that. And do you feel like there's a place, like, did doing all that work for other people kind of lead you to then want to just make your own stuff? Was it more financial, like it was easier, or like the addition of like making your own music and the amount of time and fun versus how much you made was just better there? Because I know you spend more time doing your own stuff now than you do work for hire. I think it was quite a selfish decision, really, in terms of it was actually, I should point out, my wife who said to me, you should do this, you should try this out. So try what out?
Well, she knew obviously that I could play piano really well, and she knew I could do a little bit of, like, not really production, but that I had messed about in the past. I think it was like Cakewalk Pro or something.
Right.
But she was the one, I think, who said, more from like a mental standpoint, like, this is something that you could and should do. But so at the time, obviously, so I said, I started out, I haven't always, but since my 20s, I've been really into the outdoors and that kind of stuff. So I think it made sense, for whatever reason, to try and revolve around the outdoors in some way, or try and bring that into my music in some way. I have to give a shout out to Scott Secco, because he was the guy, and I've said as much to him. Scott Secco, by the way, he's a film producer. Maybe you can Google him.
Very prolific.
Very hugely prolific,
mountain
Spielberg-esque.
bike. And phenomenal talent.
Phenomenal.
He is and a really, really amazing person.
Yeah, absolutely. But he was one of the first, because so Pink Bike is a mountain bike website, and at the time I spent a lot of time on Pink Bike, and I saw their videos, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could get a video there? So I knew Scott Secco did movies for your Monday, and I sent him an email titled Music for Your Monday, and I was like, yo, got anything for me? Like I could do stuff for you. And bless him, he was making a movie at the time, so the timing was really good. But he gave me the confidence. He was the first person who ever replied to me and said, yeah. Cool. And he was like, this is cool, this is amazing. It probably wasn't, but he was like, this is amazing, and then that was the first bit I did. I am going a bit roundabout here, but that was kind of how I got into the outdoors bit, making movies for I guess outdoor filmmakers,
making music for outdoor filmmakers.
Right. Yeah. That became quite it was very time consuming, and I think one of the things that I discovered over time was that it's very, very difficult to shoot and score right every time or any time with I guess a producer, or what would you say, a director, someone who's making a movie. Because they have something very specific in your mind, and for you to come exactly alongside them and make something exactly that they need is kind of difficult. So I decided that it would be better if I just made the music that I really loved and just put it all out there, which we talk about Artlist.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I also have a great relationship with Artlist, so I send all my music to them, they put it out there, people either like it or dislike it, and for me that worked a lot better. And then whilst I was on that journey, I thought, do I have to make music necessarily for movies? I really like making music that's just, great music, and I think there was always something inside of me that just wanted to make that kind of music. I don't know, I'm drawn, like if I sit down at a computer at whatever to make music, that's what I want to do. So,
and when you say that type of music, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think and it's a creative need, I think, to make things that you personally enjoy.
Right.
I think that's basically what it comes down to. And you hear people, you listen to music, and I think that's part of my problem is, the stuff that I listen to, I tend to make. If I'm like, this is amazing music, I think I could make something similar to this, that's what I make. And that's also become good. Like if I was just, an EDM producer, if I was Deadmau5, that would be quite limiting in terms of what could be used in movies. There's only a specific thing that Deadmau5 can be used for. But because I tend to move around a little bit, because my interest, goes whatever I'm currently listening to, I think that's worked well as well for movies.
Yeah. A couple points there. I think that on that note, I'm similar in what I do. Lots of times people are filmmakers or animators. They recommend you have like a very specific style that you're known for.
Right.
And then you get hired, or you produce that and you can become well known for that one thing. And some people do that really well. And I'm just so curious all the time. And I love trying different things and just kind of going with, where my curiosity is that, it can feel limiting if it's like I'm just producing the same thing over and over. I admire people that do and then get extremely good at doing that thing. Yeah. And what they produce, you can tell is layer upon layer of knowledge in this one specific area. Yeah. And then the other thing I was going to mention was lots of times too, when filmmakers are working on a movie, they'll use scratch tracks, they'll use temp music that then they've seen this edit, probably 1,000 times listening to this music with it. And then when they go to then score it, all of a sudden they're like, well, could you make it more like this? And, and I think it's really hard for the music producer to kind of, to
it's like, take this Taylor Swift song, but just make it better.
to reconcile, that's a real challenge. So I think, I think it's everybody's dream ultimately to say, enough with that, because I think if I was working with any other filmmaker, producer, I don't know if there ever would be an end. If there was no end date, I think we would just keep going back and forth until we die. Right. It's just like the nature of that relationship.
Or until you had a sick edit.
Yeah. And there's kind of like the deadline that just forces completion.
Right.
And I think that's challenging. Like you say, it's just this endless back and forth, tweak this, change that, or can you make it a little bit like this? And I think doing your own thing and putting it out there, especially on a platform like Artlist where, I use it and I use your music, I come across it and I'm like, oh, this is great. Or I'll search for you specifically just to see if you have new stuff or what's out there.
Yeah.
And it's such a great relationship because then I don't use temp tracks that then I get married to that I'm trying to replicate right from the beginning. I find music I like, I put it in, and I think it's nice for me as a filmmaker, and I think it's probably way better for the music producer who's going, yeah, great, you used my music that I made that I liked, that I don't need to change now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So has that been, obviously I think it's been a good relationship for you with Artlist, and is that something that is still like a basis of, how you, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but financially kind of move through the audio world?
Yeah. I mean, we can talk financially if you like, for sure. That Artlist has been the largest form of revenue for me, which is great. Really surprising and amazing. When I started with Artlist at the time, there were a few other music distribution sites that I talked with, and they said, well, we can't deal with you because you're with Artlist, who are basically, cheapening music as a whole, because it's like, $199 a year. These guys were like, no, it's like $2,000 a song or whatever, but you'd maybe license one of them a year or two of them a year kind of thing. I think Artlist has done something amazing they're similar, I feel like, to Spotify, just in terms of, so they pay very well. I think obviously you have to be successful, and it also helps that I started with them early and have a pretty large library with them, right? So all of that helps. But yeah, the money I make from Spotify and the artist side is nowhere near the Artlist.
And I know you do quite well there, like as far as streams though, like it's interesting, like that, those two sides, when someone's using your music in a production and they're part of a, whatever they pay for Artlist, depending on the model they're on, or Music Bed or whatever one they use, versus, how many streams you're getting on Spotify or YouTube Music or Apple Music or wherever. I hope that changes for artists too in the future, because I feel like that ratio probably isn't where it needs to be on those platforms. I feel like you need to get hundreds of millions of streams
absolutely.
to make up for it.
There's kind of a cool thing that happened to me by mistake, which is that the music from Artlist is almost like free advertising as well for the music that lands on Spotify.
Right.
So, people will see the music or hear the music in a video, which obviously, just lifts the whole thing up, new audience, whatever it is, and then they'll go find it on Spotify and listen to it. So that whole ecosystem dynamic together works wonderfully for me anyway.
That's a good point. I've never thought about that, actually. I was thinking about it almost the other way, that, someone would hear you on Spotify and then seek it out when they're doing something. But seeing it in a production where it is married to some kind of visual and they, love that, and then they seek that out on their own. Totally. That's cool. That's neat. And I think, you live in Roslyn, I live in Roslyn, and it's a small town, and I've talked about it here many times already, but I think it's super cool when there's people that live in a place like this that doesn't have a ton of distribution opportunities for your music, especially when you're, an electronic music producer, and the fact that you can make good revenue on songs that you've made without having to, go on tour or, go play in a bunch of places or try and like break through into radio or some traditional method, that you found this like avenue that, does well that way is super cool from a place like this, which, you know, because like you said, you're in IT as well. Yeah. It kind of lays the foundation for your life. But I feel like you're very prolific when it comes to music, and is this second career, because it isn't just, you know, a hobby, something that you do a lot of. I just think it's a rad thing to be able to do from a place like this.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, I think that's just the benefit of, I mean, Rossland's obviously a great place to do it, but, you know, I think more and more anyone who works remotely is offered a lot more opportunities, you know, just because of the remote workforce or that stuff, you know.
Yeah, I feel like it's changed a lot. Even in, you know, the last 4 years, it's the remote worker has gone from like this kind of niche, cool, oh my God, you're going remote, to like, it's a lot of people's reality. And I think for a lot of people that like change is like sweet. And then, you know, some of those people that are remote have full-time jobs for, you know, a company, they just do it remotely. And then other people are, you know, doing their own thing, just doing it from somewhere else. And I think it's the infrastructure now for a lot of people has changed and allows those opportunities to exist, to live in places like this. I think the challenge of it is like, I live in this place and I work for myself, and you think I should be able to get up to the ski hill whenever I want, because, you know, I work for myself. But there's almost like something that like holds me down with like, you work for yourself, so you got to just be busy, because you never know, you know, when the gig is up, and you're not going to get the next job. So there's like this weird balance. I've been doing it for 22 years or something, and you think I'd be like, that's all good, you know, just enjoy yourself. But there's like this boom, 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 boom.
Well, there's this interesting thing I've been thinking about recently with regard to music, and I've started to think about it in terms of my health, my own mental health. I don't know if it's the same for video. It might be, but there's this feeling that you have in music where, because you're not making cabinets, you know, like a very simple, I know exactly how to do this. I'm going to make this a dovetail joint. The screw's going to go there. You know, making music, you're pulling things from the air. You know, you could sit down one day and have the greatest intentions of making the best music in the world and make the worst song in the world. And some days, you know, you'll just be messing about and make the song that like people know you for, you know, which is weird. But so that's the weird thing about music, but it is also the thing that makes you get up every single day and go, it's out there. It's out there. Like the song is out there. If I just put in like the time, it's out there. And that is also a thing that, you know, if you're not sat behind your computer trying to find that song, you kind of feel like, I should probably be back there, you know, which is not something, you know, that I've ever found, because I have, you know, two different jobs. It's and they're very different. You know, in IT, I don't go on holiday and start thinking I should be back there. But with music, you know, it's this pull of like, I gotta, the song's out there, you know.
Totally. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm sure it's different. I feel more probably like illustration, animation is similar like that, where you're creating something from nothing, versus like say filmmaking, where you're capturing something that might exist. Or, but yeah, I feel like, you know, oftentimes I'll come and work on a weekend, even if it's at night, and, you know, people are like, why are you crazy? And it's like, I just like doing it. I want to, you know, I'm in the middle of something, and it just like, I can't stop thinking about it. And it's like a fever. It is like one of the best feelings. It's hard to explain this. Like you said, it's like that magnetic attraction, this pull to like come back to it. And even when I leave, I'm driving home, and it's a short drive, 3 minutes, I think. In that 3 minutes, all of a sudden, all these things, and I get home, and, you know, kids are trying to talk to me, or my wife, and I'm just like, oh, I got to like write down. And it's just like, you know, when you're into it, and I think, I've heard it, a lot in music where people they're not even going to put that track on their LP and then it becomes the hit,
Right.
They're not going to, they're not going to push that one.
Yeah.
And, someone's like, oh, let's just try it. And it becomes the radio hit. And
Absolutely.
I think it's very hard to predict what people are going to like or not like.
Yeah.
And I think trends, and I don't know if I used to not necessarily chase trends, but I was far more concerned with trends and where they were going and trying to keep my finger on that pulse. And now I spend way less time doing that and more curious and follow my own curiosity and what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And maybe it comes from like knowing the tools much better. So I feel like if someone did want something,
Right.
I can figure it out.
Right.
Versus before where I was like, I need to know how to do that.
Right.
So is that something you concern yourself with, kind of where the trends are at and what's happening?
No, I don't think I do. I'll have to think about that briefly. I do follow trends to a degree. No, I don't think so. I don't actively follow trends. Well, I don't know. Do I
guess it's a hard one. Like, the difference between following a trend for following its sake versus like, this is the stuff I'm into,
right,
and I'm interested in, and therefore is inspiring what I'm doing. Yeah,
I don't spend a lot of time, just like researching what the current trends are for sure. Yeah. But I think I'm definitely guided and interested in, what's happening musically right now out there. And I definitely do follow, where music is going. I think there are some musicians and some creatives, I would say like the genuine creatives who something just comes from their heart and they like, it's completely original. It's, of them, or it's fully their creation. And then other people try to copy them for decades. I don't think I'm that person.
Yeah, I admire those people too. I think it's very few.
I think so. I think it's kind of rare.
Yeah. Even when I do think I'm creating something that's, of nothing else, it's my own.
Yeah.
By the time I'm done, I'm like, I can see all the influences that, led to that thing.
Right. Which is a good thing, I think.
Which is fine.
I believe in it.
Yeah. Also, like I'm a work for hire creative as well. So a lot of what I do is like, I get sent stuff that I'm supposed to make it look like.
Right.
And so a lot of that is like wired already to be like, take in influences, filter that into what the person needs. And then, so if you're a younger version of yourself, interested in music.
Are you saying I'm not young, Scotty?
Well, you look much younger than I am. I'm not going to guess your age, but you're my junior. And now, I feel like it's always interesting when people have kind of touched on a lot of different things. You've kind of dipped your toes in a lot of different places and tried it out when it comes to music and production and then also making that viable, financially. And so if you were a younger producer that is making music, maybe is in a small town, doesn't have a bunch of reach, doesn't have a big social media following, but is interested in trying, their parents are on them about finding a career. Do you have any advice for someone in that situation?
Talk to Scott Secco.
I'm not going to cut you off there, but I do think that is like, that initial email you sent out.
Yeah.
I used to get way more of those in my inbox from young filmmakers, or I don't want to say young, but like from other filmmakers, music producers, voiceover artists. I don't know if it's just the temperature of the world right now as far as like what's happening, but I get way less of it. And I might not respond to everyone or like connect with everyone or collaborate with everyone, but I do sometimes, and I'm not the only one. So I feel like it is a bit of a lost art, the kind of
the
cold
hustle.
email, the hustle, the outreach, the doing what it takes to kind of get that, because you don't know the trajectory it will send you on.
No.
You kind of entered that world through Scott Secco, and you're doing productions, doing movies and TV shows and web edits and all sorts of stuff. And we worked together in that realm, and you did lots of awesome stuff for us. But but then that kind of shifted you into doing more of your own stuff.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people, you know, just because you came in this door doesn't mean you're going to stay in that room. You know, it's
right.
I think some people fear like if I go this direction, then that's it, versus like that might just lead to more opportunities. So
yeah,
back to what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I think the first thing I would say to anyone, you know, like a young person going down this thing, it is a little bit corny, but you know, just because I come up with some advice doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. I think every person, and I think if you spoke to, you know, any other filmmaker that you know, or any other creative person, every path is different. Everyone has this, you know, their way of getting into it. So I wouldn't be, you know, kind of pigeonholed by, you know, what you should or shouldn't do. I would say one of the things you should definitely do is get a job. Only because, I mean, people fight me for that, but I think it does to an extent free you up. If you're, you know, desperate for money, it'll come across as that when you're working with people. You know, you'll take on any job, you'll just be fighting for that, right? So I think it does also free you up to a degree. And I mean, like I said, don't take my advice necessarily. Maybe it'll work perfectly for you to just be in the music and maybe work at a studio or something like that. But I think, you know, this is a rough business. Yeah, I don't know if people know that, but getting into music is not an easy job. You know, it's not like, you know, you start at the bottom and you move up and there's this trajectory, you know, these guarantees. It's I don't want to say cutthroat. It's very difficult, low margins. You know, if you make it in music, even, you know, mid-tier, you've done very, very well. And especially now, you know, now we've got AI. I don't even want to get into AI. We've got AI-generated music. You know, we've got kids on laptops, you know, who started making music when they're 6. It's a difficult thing to get into. I think you have to forge your own way, and you know, it'll be some quote by Rick Rubin, right? Of just like follow your heart, be true to yourself, you know, follow the art that's inside you, something like that, right? That is also important stuff, hugely important when. Because that's going to be the stuff that you enjoy doing. You have to enjoy making music, otherwise it's going to suck.
Yeah.
Imagine making jingles for a living.
Yeah. I think I'd love it. I love coming up with jingles.
Oh no.
Yeah. Jingles for everything.
Yeah, maybe that's
But yeah, I think one thing you mentioned was the job, and I think that it's something that isn't talked about a lot, and I think there's the romantic, you know, sleep on the couch and the futon or whatever it takes until you make it. And I think if you're willing to do that and you can and it works out, that's amazing. Yeah. But I think for a lot of people, it ends up crashing us out sooner than we would. Right. Because you can't, for lots of us, you just can't go on that long without having some kind of financial stability. Right. And I think for a lot of people, like you say, having some kind of, you know, foundation financially frees you up to just then create, especially when you're younger and you don't have as many responsibilities with kids and, you know, if you don't own houses and all the things that go with it. If you can just then spend your extra time, I think it's such a smart way to go. Yeah. Especially in industries where it's going to take a lot of up at bats, you know, potentially, you know, there's other things that are a little bit maybe easier on the creative side. You know, making stuff like videos can be easier because there can be a one-to-one service. You can go and if you want to break in, you know, people need videos, you know how to make videos. There's a transaction that can happen. You can go into businesses, you can kind of offer your services, you can connect with other, you know, filmmakers and creative studios. Yeah. Whereas music is much more of this, kind of personal taste, harder to go into the kitchen store and see if they want a custom song made. Yeah. But I think it's something that is often not romanticized, and therefore people feel like they don't want to do it. Yeah. And I think certain creative, I think it depends on where your level is in the creativity realm. You know, are you Kurt Cobain?
I think some people live off that sort of that anarchy that the music business might give, maybe I'm thinking more about like rock stars and that kind of thing. Certainly not in, making like the Hans Zimmer, making music for movies.
He's kind of a rock star though.
And now he is.
And that's the other thing too. That length of career, like I think that sometimes your biggest hits don't come out until
until you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. But when I think I was like 23 or 24, and we were working actually with this very prolific music producer who happened to live in Roslyn at the time, and he had worked on major hits. Yeah. And he was doing a little project with the ski hill, and we were helping him, and we were hungry. We wanted to make movies. We wanted to be and we thought we were really great. And he said, "Oh yeah, give yourself 10 to 15 years, and you'll have enough kind of experience and knowledge and network." And I remember thinking like, I'm talking like 10 to 15 days. Like I have stuff that I can make that's going to be great. And the fact you're saying, and it just like shook me. And it's probably been 15 to 20 years since I had that talk with him.
Right.
And even just now it's starting to settle in like, oh yeah, I am now just starting to like really feel comfortable with the things I want to make, and the direction I feel comfortable taking things, and aesthetically what I like, and taste. And so I think for people coming up, not as like a negative thing, you could have a hit day one, week one, it just could happen, but it might not. And that's okay too. And I think not to get discouraged and to continue on, I think is important, because you just never know at what point that, like, for me, it's kind of like every 5 years, I tend to have this thing that kind of like works with an audience well.
Right.
That kind of like is a little spike, and it gives me that little dopamine, like, okay.
Right.
And and then it goes back, and I can make stuff that works and, satisfies people. But then there's this, and I think, it might be a little bit, you might be just on the verge of one of those. And I just don't want people to give up because it's whatever creative industry they're in.
Right. Yeah. You just got to keep on putting the hours in, I guess. 10 to 15 years, apparently.
Well, and that was before the Malcolm Gladwell, like 10,000 hours book. It was back in, he was telling us all these awesome stories. And in my mind, I'm like, you sound quite young in the stories you were telling. So you were doing well at a young age. Why are you saying we won't be able to do the same thing? But
I will just say the other interesting thing that I found just specifically about creativity, I think I wrote some of my best songs before I could produce, but the production sucked.
Totally.
So I needed to like tie in being great at production, because I think like the ideas back then were honest.
Yeah.
And you get, I don't want to say poisoned, you get just knocked from side to side over the years, all these different things, but the stuff that you made right when you were like, when you're just starting out, that was the cream of the crop.
Yeah, there's a rawness. I mean, even I think sometimes knowing all the tools actually limits you, because you start kind of knowing too much. You can overthink things versus in the beginning when you just had this idea. Yeah. And any means possible, you were going to make it. Right. And I think, a lot of the music I like, a lot of albums are earlier albums of artists. And I think there's this like, just here it is. Yeah. And I think, I agree. When I was younger, I really wanted to be a rapper. Oh. And I still, to this day, I'm 45 now. Yeah. And I still, those songs I rap constantly. And I've written more over the years, but those ones from like my teenage, early 20s are just on loop, and they're just funny, and they make me smile and laugh. And I think I'll also go through these like stages where I'll have like ideas just pour out of me, and I write them down and I catalog them. And then as life gets busier, less gets written down. And then I it's nice to look back and be like, okay, I have this kind of database of ideas and writing and stuff to kind of pull from. And as I go back, I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. Like, this is a lot better than what I'm coming up with right now.
Today.
Yeah.
It's so discouraging.
Yeah. And, life can beat you down a bit with, finances or kids or hardships or health or whatever it might be. So I think one cool thing about art is that if you have some kind of body of it to kind of look back, and just immediately brings you back to this point in time of like, oh yeah, I remember I was, in my 20s living in Vancouver, crushing it, having a good time, no kids yet, mountain biking, making scores for movies.
Yeah, I don't go that far back. I'm 46 now, so I guess I started when I was like 30, 35, 36. So I had kids when I started. I wasn't that cool.
That's sweet, though. I think that it's almost cooler that way, when kids are such a good like marker of time. You can your kid turns 12, you can be like, oh yeah, it's been 12 years. That's gone by real quick. So to kind of wrap things up here. Going forward, music's still a big part of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Forever will be, I think.
Yeah. Would you say that's like the biggest constant in what you do?
In my life as a whole?
Yeah. Is it the thing that grounds you? Is it your North Star? Or is that the outdoors? What is the...
No, yeah, that has changed. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I mean, music, I think, will always be present. Whether it's my North Star, I can't say that. I didn't move to Rossland for music. It's definitely, having a creative outlet is really important for me. I think that's the most I can say about it. If I didn't have that creative outlet, then things would be different for me, I think, in a worse way. So being able to make music is a huge net positive in my life, and I think that's the best way for me to look at it. I don't think of it as something that guides me or something that leads me in any specific direction. It's just a massive bonus in my life to be able to do this stuff. It's a good thing. It's a great thing, being creative.
Yeah, agreed. Do you find that you do you work a whole bunch on music for a stint and then take a break, and then the reservoir gets filled back up and then you produce a whole bunch again? Or is it like this kind of trickle constant thing for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I used to back when I was starting, I would go on holiday for maybe 2-3 weeks at a time, and the whole time I'd be so worried that when I got back I wouldn't be able to make music anymore. Like, it would be gone. I'd be like, where are all these songs gone? But yeah, I'm not worried like that anymore. So yeah, I think it's actually become a well balanced thing for me now, where I can take it or leave it. Like, I can go away, and to a degree, like, there's always the feeling in my mind of like, you got to go back, But we were in Europe for a month, and I never thought about music. And a lot of artists, got in touch with me, and they were like, "Yo, did you bring your laptop with? What a great place to write music." And I was like, "No, I didn't. I'm just visiting Paris. It's great here." I wouldn't even say that that stuff gave me any kind of what's it called?
Like inspiration.
Inspiration. Yeah. No. Yeah, I think it's at this point it's just become a very just a kind of a daily ebb and flow. I think it used to feel much more maniacal in the beginning. I think when you're learning something, right, you're just like, I need more of this thing, and I need to get back to learn this thing. Whereas now, I think I'm in an okay place. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I'm in a little bit in a maniacal phase right now with something, and it is that, like, it's just like, I can't stop. And when I'm away, it's like, I'm
thinking about it.
Yeah. And another point there, you say being on vacation and people asking if you brought your laptop or working on things. And I used to, anytime I went on vacation, I'm like, it'll be a perfect time to do some writing, to work on this, bring my sketch pad and all my things. And then I'll get there and I'm having fun.
Yeah.
And I'm doing stuff and I'm busy.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's like this feeling like, oh, but I'm not
being productive or creative.
And then there's like this weird guilt, like I was gonna do all this stuff on vacation and now I didn't. And then I'd get back and feel like, no, vacation was a failure. Right. And I was like, what is the point of that? So now I'm like you. I'm like, when I go on vacation, it is truly to reset, to enjoy.
Yeah.
And not even necessarily reset, just enjoy it. Just go and explore and do something different. And as soon as I stopped pressuring this, like, you know, it's got to also be a creative, you know, I have all this time to make something.
Yeah.
Enjoyed myself. And when I got back, it wasn't about like, oh, now I'm flooded with ideas and I just can't wait to pour them down. But I just come back with like, oh, that was fun. I enjoyed that, instead of, oh, I feel guilty that I didn't make something while I was supposed to be vacationing. So yeah, I'm with you, especially on stuff like that, you know, going to Europe and going to France, where you want to be pretty, you know, present and engaged and really taking it in.
It's not difficult. It's amazing out there.
Yeah, the photos look sweet. It was cool too, because it looked like you guys hopped around a bit and kind of stayed in different spots that had different vibes. And,
right. Yeah. I mean, Europe is just, there's many corners to visit. For sure.
Yeah. That looks like definitely something I would like to replicate. Have to get pick your brain on that one.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah. There's a few spots there I'd like to really go and spend. Didn't do that, you know, go for a month at least.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Worth it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Scotty. It was great.
Yeah, we covered a lot. Thank you so much to Oliver for joining me today. Oliver has always inspired me with his ability to balance not only two careers, but his work and his play. He's always getting after it in the outdoors while working a full-time job and producing music at an incredible pace. Remember, you might just be one email away from your own door opening. Just a friendly reminder to hit send in work and the outdoors. Until next time.